Hi everybody and welcome to this documentary on Timeline. My name's Dan Snow and I want to tell you about History Hit TV. It's like the Netflix for history. Hundreds of exclusive documentaries and interviews with the world's best historians. We've got an exclusive offer available to fans of Timeline. If you go to History Hit TV, you can either follow the information below this video or just Google History Hit TV and use the code TIMELINE. You get a special introductory offer. Go and check it out. In the meantime, enjoy this video.
This is the Severn Estuary. England is over there, Wales is over there, and Newport's glistening behind us in the distance somewhere. But what we're interested in happened down there. 7,500 years ago, this was the winter retreat for a community of Stone Age people who lived and worked and hunted along this coastline. It's covered in water now, but when the tide retreats, you can actually see evidence of these people. But what the river's protected for so long, it's now in danger of destroying. And that's why we're here, to lift some of the most at-risk archaeology before it's lost forever under the water. This is a really treacherous site. There's cloying mud, unforgiving tides, even quicksand. Even so, we've still got only 3 days to do it. For this dig, we're focusing on the Middle Stone Age, or Mesolithic period, which lasted for 6,000 years from the end of the last ice age around 9,500 BC. In archaeological terms, Mesolithic sites are as rare as hen's teeth, and at best normally only consist of scatters of flint or unstratified bits of bone or antler. And that makes this beach at Goldcliff in South Wales very important. It's packed with some of the best Stone Age archaeology in the country, and the man in charge of untangling it is Professor Martin Bell of Reading University. You've been down here a long time now, haven't you?
Yes, 13 years on the foreshore in the Severn Estuary.
What is it that attracts you about this place?
Well, it's the exceptionally preserved archaeology, really, the waterlogged deposits, the sealed archaeological sites that are quite unlike the ones you get on dry land.
What do you reckon we can do here, Mick?
Well, I think there's a lot we can do to help Martin, and a lot we can learn about this period. I mean, it's a very long period, the Mesolithic. We're probably talking about, what, 5,000 or 6,000 years, something like that. And yet we know so little about it. And I think part of the reason for that is that they're not farmers. They're hunter-gatherers and fishers and so on, and they're moving about. And so they don't build the permanent structures which we rely on to find, and they don't leave all the debris behind. So I think almost anything we can do to help is going to increase our knowledge.
So far, Martin has excavated 25 separate sites on the foreshore, establishing that much of this beach was at some time a campsite for Mesolithic hunters and their families. And Time Team now have a unique opportunity to get involved in rescuing part of this rare British archaeological site. The strong tides of the River Severn are destroying the foreshore faster than Martin can investigate it. And it'll be our job to salvage some of the most at-risk archaeology before it's lost to the sea. And this is our target, 15 square metres of beach known as Trench B.
It's being really seriously eroded by the waves ripping through, and that's the site that we're going to have a go at, block lifting down there and then taking it onto dry land to do an excavation.
It's quite low down on the foreshore, so we don't have a lot of time before the tide comes in.
This will be a race against time. We only have a 2-hour digging window each day, and that's not all.
Be very careful how you walk because it's very slippery.
But hasn't somebody told me there's quicksands out there?
There is quicksands out there, yes.
How do we recognise quicksands?
When you sink in it.
Our restricted time on the foreshore will rule out normal archaeological techniques. So instead of digging Trench B on site, we're going to move it to dry land where we can excavate it at our leisure.
You're very delicate with that apparatus.
Yeah, well, I'm a very delicate chap, really.
The concept's simple enough. Map out Trench B into 1 metre squares and then divide each of them into lots of little blocks. We then cut and lift those blocks, take them off the foreshore and put them back together again in our nice dry trench tent. And hopefully by the end of day 3, we'll have filled 15 of these metre square frames.
It is like cake making, isn't it?
It's going to take a lot of effort to get Trench B to safety.
No, you just get on and do it. We want to get as much dirt up as possible, as quickly as possible.
But Martin's convinced it's worth it. Finds from nearby trenches point to a lot of Mesolithic activity in this area. So what kind of finds have you had out?
A lot of flints, large axe adze, which this actually comes from the site that you're going to be excavating down lower in the tidal frame. This was just 5 metres from the trench.
What's an adze, Mick?
Well, it's a woodworking tool, isn't it? I mean, it's fantastic to find something like that, because we know they chop trees down and work wood and so on, but you don't very often find things like that, do you?
No, in fact there are only, I think, 4 examples from Wales, and all of them come from this site.
So what do the finds that you've had so far tell us about what was going on here?
Well, a range of activities, really. I mean, they're hunting in a big way. Clearly, they're working flints. One of the things they're coming down to the coast to do is to get raw materials to make tools, some of which they probably used elsewhere.
So the prospects for Trench B are good, but can we actually save all 15 square metres of it in just 3 days? Well, it would help if we could all agree on how to do it.
No, but that doesn't mean to say we can't cut, though, does it?
Some blocks we have to lift out and then put in the tin.
It's really the bottom of the tin you need level.
Yeah, I'd rather put the level actually on the tin in situ.
We can't put those tins in.
Well, use the other ones then.
Yeah, right, but I need a hammer then.
The point of it is, if you don't take it away, then the Severn will, won't it?
That's it, absolutely.
So, I mean, I would have thought that for the sake of like 2 or 3 centimetres one way or the other,
absolutely,
they'd to hell with that degree of accuracy. Let's at least get main of it
back
out.
to basics, isn't it? Find and record.
Despite Goldcliff being one of the best Mesolithic sites in Britain, I've been warned I shouldn't expect some sort of Stone Age village or town to appear. In fact, when we do get finds, they'll probably be among the smallest things I've ever seen on Time Team. And it's all because the Mesolithic way of life is unlike any other we've investigated.
What we're looking at are people who are hunter-gatherers, who had very mobile lifestyles. These were people who moved a great deal around the landscape, so they'd carry everything that they needed with them. And as a result, of course, this means that there's not very much left behind. They only left behind things that they didn't need.
What do we need to find in the next 3 days to give us a better picture of how long they were living here and what they were doing here?
Well, I think what's really wonderful about this particular site is that it was sealed soon after it was abandoned by mud covering the site. And this means that we're actually going to find things just as they were left 6,000 to 7,000 years ago, which is quite remarkable. I suppose, you could think of it in a way as a sort of a Mesolithic Pompeii, but only without the volcanic disaster. But if we actually uncover it, we'll actually be looking at a site as it was left, untouched, and with a remarkable range of materials.
Except unlike Pompeii, this is not a site for geophys. The lack of permanent structures plus the nomadic lifestyle mean there's simply nothing for them to detect. But surprisingly, Stuart still thinks that maps and the modern landscape may help him with the story of Stone Age Goldcliff. Stuart, normally we'd be looking to you for ancient trackways and lumps and bumps that might be people's houses. You're not going to be able to give us any of that, are you?
Not from this particular period here, no, but there are other clues that I think can help us build up a picture of what life might have been like here. I mean, why did they live here? What factors influenced them to live here, whether they spent a week or a month or whatever. So what I'm going to do is look at evidence, just as if we were looking for earthworks or anything else. Are there any clues in the geology, the natural landforms, the way the rivers are working, and so on, to give us any clues as to why they decided to spend time here?
You could go that way, or this
All that way, all that
yeah.
way, all that way. When we get off that second 1 square metres,
Yeah.
and then that would just be more efficient with people power
Yeah,
as well,
absolutely,
instead of
yeah.
having lots of people standing around.
Yeah, absolutely.
Back on the foreshore, the diggers have now solved the early teething problems and are working like a well-oiled machine. The deconstruction of Trench B is picking up pace. Or at least it was. Phil, I can't lift anything. Both my feet are stuck.
Well, why are you holding onto my hand?
Just so I don't get sucked under. Oh, blimey, I'm not joking. Now we get this in here.
Now you get it in there.
Gordon Bennett.
I know.
My feet are stuck again. The sheer weight of this. Oh, it's easy, isn't it?
All right, and pull your spade out now. Got it?
Yeah.
Now you take it over there and get it wrapped. I'm enjoying this.
It's the weight. Every time you pick this up, the weight forces your feet down.
We've not been having this problem. You've got a low centre of gravity or something.
With the first square metre safely lifted, stage 2 of the process begins.
We just stick them on the ground for now.
Reassembling the blocks back in the salubrious surroundings of our trench tent.
Done one. Yeah.
Back on the foreshore, the tide is now threatening Trench B. With our diggers having done as much as they can down here, it's time for them to evacuate the beach and get back onto dry land. Seeing all these trenches in the mud, it's hard to remember that the people that we're setting out to discover didn't actually live in mud.
No, absolutely not. I mean, the landscape that we're looking out at today is completely different from the one that they occupied 7,000 years ago or thereabouts.
What would it have looked like here?
Well, I think what we'd be looking at is a salt marsh. There would be reed beds and probably trees dotted around and so forth. A much more productive environment, I think, than the one that we have before us today.
And it's been protected by the sea for all these years, and yet now the archaeologists are saying we've got to move it because the sea's threatening it. Why?
Well, I mean, this unfortunately is partly inevitability of climatic warming and rising sea levels, and sites like this are being uncovered and actively destroyed. So, I mean, on the one hand, we're very lucky that sites like this are exposed, but I mean, we leave it a year or two and it'll all be washed away.
Well, the sea isn't getting this particular chunk of foreshore. It's now safely back in the trench tent, along with our diggers, who've swapped the back-breaking work of lifting the blocks for the back-breaking work of forensic micro-archaeology. This couldn't be more different from excavating a Roman villa or a medieval cathedral. Here we're looking for finds that may be only a few millimetres across. The whole process requires painstaking concentration. Every find must be catalogued, no matter how trivial, as it could shed new light on life in Mesolithic Goldcliff.
Whoa! That's a pebble by the looks of it.
I think that is a pebble, yeah.
I'd put that in the pebbles bag.
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
So, cue the pebble bag.
And despite this minute investigation of each block, we're still not taking any chances. The spoil from each square is then filtered through various sieves to make sure we haven't missed a thing. It's an awful lot of work.
I mean, the weird thing, of course, is that we might be doing all this fearsome or this fearless excavation. There may be nothing here.
There might be nothing here, that's right. Yeah, there might be anything here at all. But if there is, you will find it.
While Phil gets to grips with the minutiae of Stone Age Goldcliff, Stuart and Henry are looking at the bigger picture. Although now part of the mainland, previous excavations show that Goldcliff was actually an island during the Mesolithic period, a legacy still visible in modern mapping.
A while ago, and you can see the drainage patterns are shown on here, and peculiarly, you see these arrows that marks the direction of the waterflow. They're going away.
They're going the wrong way,
from
aren't
the
they?
coast. All the drainage is going back that way, which suggests that there's a rise in the ground here. You see the levels down here, there's 22 there and 20. It's actually dropping away, so that actually could be the edge of the island.
Around here?
We're in business.
Yeah. But yeah, I think since it gets
Problem is what? Eddie, you got your spyglass?
Yeah.
Cheers. Oh.
It is retouched.
Is it?
Yeah, yeah. That's brilliant.
At last, after 8 hours hard graft, we've found something that has the archaeologists all of a flutter. A find that bears witness to the technical skill of these Mesolithic people. A find that I've been leaning on for 2 minutes without realising.
What? I knew you'd be impressed.
What
I
is
just
that?
knew you'd be impressed. Here you go. Have a look through that magnifying glass. Now, along that edge there, you will see where somebody has retouched that piece of flint. So this is just one end of the whole thing. But of course, this is the problem. This is why we have to be so careful with our excavating technique, because this is the sort of stuff that you get in the Mesolithic.
This minute piece of flint, known as a microlith, once belonged to a much larger sharpened edge. But it hasn't just been worked once, it's been retouched or resharpened, suggesting that it was so useful to a Mesolithic hunter that he went to the effort of making a new cutting edge once the original had been blunted. And it was these flint razors that made up the tools of the hunter-gatherers 7,500 years ago.
We know that these microliths, these small blades, they must have been set in some form of shaft or handle, and they could be used in a number of different ways. They're the original sort of plug-in tool, so that you could use them.
What do you mean when you say plug-in tool?
Well, for example, when something is damaged or broken, you can literally pull it out and replace it with a exactly similar component, so that they could be used in a variety of different ways, as shown here.
See, the beauty of it is that you don't need a big piece of flint to make a long cutting edge. I mean, you've got, what, a couple of inches of cutting edge there. You don't need one continuous edge. You can put in some very, very small bits of flint.
They are fairly impressive, but they're pretty unsophisticated, aren't they? Presumably there's quite a limit to what people would do with them.
No. Oh. Look, think about the range of functions that you've got here. You can go out and kill with something like that. You've got this piercing thing. You can use virtually the same tip to drill holes. You've got cutting edges to do all your fine duty woodworking, your butchery. You've got scraping tools to scrape skins, to scrape woods. You've got engraving tools as well. You've got a whole range of tools, all based around these small bits of flint. They are very, very sophisticated.
It's the end of day one. It's been a heck of a lot of hard work, and the total result from all that graft has been this: a little bag of pebbles and the most microscopic find I think we've ever had. The problem is the whole process is so frustratingly slow. We've got to really get that process going much faster. But what's really exciting me about tomorrow is that it'll be the first chance that I've had to see real evidence of Mesolithic people on this site, because tomorrow I'm going to see some Stone Age footprints. Join us after the break. Day 2 of our dig on the Stone Age site in South Wales, and the rescue archaeology is already underway.
Right then, guys, let's go.
We're battling to save 15 square metres of this Mesolithic foreshore before it's lost to the sea.
Oh yes, that's nice. Whoa.
But it's turned out to be more of a challenge than we expected. Yesterday, we only managed to salvage a tenth of our target before the tide came in. Today, we've simply got to do better. Away from the filth and the fury of Trench B, the rest of the foreshore is emerging from the River Severn, including one of the most evocative sights we've ever seen on Time Team.
They're absolutely everywhere, aren't they? That one, that's a cracker, isn't it? It's just unbelievable.
They may not seem much at first glance, but these muddy impressions, excavated by Reading postgraduate Rachel Scales, are physical remains of the Mesolithic people who once lived here. Footprints made by hunter-gatherers walking across this landscape 7,500 years ago. They're so fresh. Are you absolutely convinced that these are Mesolithic?
absolutely convinced, Tony. I mean, their relationship to the geology around here, there's a layer of peat just below this, which has been dated. So there's absolutely no question that these are Mesolithic footprints, and there's a mass of material above it.
They're absolutely sealed in.
They are
no one
sealed
could have done-
stratigraphically. They have to be Mesolithic.
Wow, that's incredible, isn't it?
Isn't that something?
That's really neat. You
It
can
is
see the way they press down on there as they will.
It is just so totally a snapshot in time, isn't it?
At the time these footprints were made, this foreshore wouldn't have been covered with the slippery, silty stuff we're walking on today. But it still would have been pretty muddy, and that, in the right conditions, is perfect for preserving footprints.
This would have been sort of probably a salt marsh environment, so the mud that they would have been walking in would have been relatively soft. So that as the person's been walking, they've sunk into the mud, their footprints made an impression on the surface of the mud, and then over time the footprint has filled in.
But trying to find these silt and mud-filled footprints in a silty, muddy landscape requires a special sort of excavation. And that means Phil experiencing a new, touchy-feely form of archaeology.
So that's the clay there.
Yeah, the loose clay sat on top of the sand and
it is definitely softer in there, isn't it? And is that how they normally appear?
Yep, they just normally appear like that, and you either gently ease them with the fingertips.
But other than that, it's just a matter of literally lifting the clay off.
Peeling the laminations back bit by bit until you reach the level that the footprints are on.
I bet it gets quite therapeutic after a while.
It is. It's very nice. It's a beautiful place to work. It's a very calm place.
But it's about the only place that is calm. The rest of the foreshore is a hive of activity. Further up the beach, Martin Bell and his team from Reading University are carefully scraping away the layers of their latest trench on this site. While in Trench B, it looks like our hard graft and teamwork are paying off.
It's actually working a lot quicker. And we're getting a lot more out at the moment. We've just finished the half a block we missed yesterday. We've taken out a metre there, and that's the last block coming out from a metre over there. So we've got 2.5 metres already.
And we've still got another 50 minutes left before the tide comes in. This site has turned out to be quite a challenge for our diggers, but they're not the only ones. Stuart's trying to discover what made Goldcliff such an attractive location to Mesolithic man. But apart from the fact it was an island situated between the mouths of two rivers, the Usk and the Wye, he can't get a lot more out of his beloved maps. These Stone Age people were nomadic hunter-gatherers who left little or no impact on the landscape. And that's a problem if you're a landscape investigator, so Stuart's on a steep learning curve.
Well, when they're not here, where are they going? I don't understand this sort of movement in this period.
I think that the idea is that they are moving upstream, perhaps at different times of the year, along the rivers, because there were different resources available in other locations. We know, for example, at certain times of the year that deer will move up into the uplands. So, to a certain extent, they'll be following game, but also knowing every inch of their landscape and knowing when to move, when plants ripen and so forth.
Get to every inch of the landscape, I mean, that's where I'm quite interested in actually plotting where a lot of these Mesolithic finds have been in this area. I mean, I need to do that to get some picture of how movement is in this localised area. Could we actually go and do that now?
Yes.
I'm struggling without a map, you see. I need to see things on a map. I can't do it without.
Yes, I know exactly what you mean.
The tide is once again threatening Trench B. So it's time for our diggers to retreat to the safety of the trench tent. We've succeeded in salvaging 3 square metres of beach, twice yesterday's amount. Although we won't know what's in any of it for at least a couple of hours. But there's no such weight back at the footprints. Rachel and Phil have just found compelling evidence that our Mesolithic ancestors had to put up with some of the same hazards we face today.
So what have you got there then, Rachel?
Basically, it's quite a kind of thick, brown, kind of organic sort of splodge that was just in the heel of the footprint there.
Yeah.
So,
what might that be?
it could possibly be dung or something like that. It's something we're looking out for at the moment.
This looks suspiciously like a Mesolithic foot that stood in some Mesolithic deer poo.
Well, we all know the business about walking along and finding you got something stuck to your foot, don't we? So obviously the same is happening 8,000, 9,000 years ago.
It's just another little, albeit smelly, piece of evidence to add to the 177 footprints Rachel has recorded on this site. Why is it that you've got so few footprints, whereas Rachel has found so many?
It's because the area that I've drawn to excavate, Mesolithic people weren't walking on it. You can see they were clearly congregating in that area, but not this way.
All these trails of footprints at first glance would appear to have very little rhyme or reason. But as some of these smaller prints seem to belong to children, they do offer us a tantalising glimpse of a Stone Age family. And that's why Rachel's keen to build up a database that will allow her to decipher the trails and get a better idea of what's going on. So while Phil goes for a hose down before rejoining most of the team in the trench room, I've been volunteered to get my feet dirty. Makes a very rude noise every time your foot comes out the mud.
As soon as it gets too deep for you, come back, but don't come back across the footprints you've already made.
Come on, Brigid. In the name of experimental archaeology, I now find myself walking hand in hand with Brigid across a salt marsh that would have been similar to the one at Stone Age Goldcliff. I can't get a purchase with these muddy feet. I know that people watching this will be thinking, well, it's a right hoot, but actually it's not going to achieve very much. Does it have much purpose?
Oh, yes. By studying the modern footprints here, I can start to make comparisons and understand perhaps maybe people were walking faster or maybe stalking an animal, or maybe if they were carrying a weight, or say coming back from the estuary carrying a basket of fish or something like that.
Go on, you two.
Right, you want me to get down there and play mother?
Yeah.
Right.
So with the help of various willing volunteers, including young Jake here, we're going to make a variety of trails in the salt marsh.
So it's left to left, isn't it?
Yeah.
Start on this one.
Yeah, left heel impression to second left heel impression.
Then, under the guidance of Professor Robin Crompton, an expert on the forensics of footprints, we'll see how the results compare to footprints uncovered by Rachel on the Goldcliff foreshore. But as with everything else on this site, even the simplest of tasks can become a hazardous, mucky business.
Ah.
There's got to be a better way to do it than this. Back in the trench tent, the science of archaeology is proving equally messy.
You've got me confused now.
You add the
back side together.
Yeah.
And that makes the instrument high. And then
No, it doesn't.
No, I haven't got a clue what they're talking about either.
If you add on 3.43, it's going up.
But I think they're trying to work out a three-dimensional sum which would tell them how the blocks fit together.
Oh, you can put in a minus thing.
That's what I'm saying. You start with a minus number. And
Well, it's a I don't know how to use calculators.
I'll bring you an abacus next time.
Well, I'm glad they got that sorted out, because the diggers have really got to get a move on. It's fantastic that we've lifted twice as much of Trench B as we did yesterday. But of course what this means is we now have to process twice as much as we did yesterday.
That clay is awful stuff.
And it's not a task anyone's savouring. But Dan has got a slightly controversial idea.
This process can be speeded up by just being less cautious. We've got the metre square all marked out. We know where everything's coming from. We can just whip through it.
Are you advocating sloppy archaeology?
Not at all. That's all salvage. It's everything we do is a bonus, because the Severn will have it if we don't get it. No matter what level we get it at, it's all a bonus, isn't it?
Oh, this is some glutinous stuff. I mean, there is no way that this can be excavated systematically. That is all just going to have to come off.
And help may now be at hand, in a most unlikely form. Bone, even I know that this is not an archaeological tool.
Well, in fact, it has been used on Mesolithic sites in Denmark before, so I think there's a good precedent for using it.
What are we going to use it for?
Well, you know those individual blocks that we take at the moment? We
Yeah.
break them up by hand before they go through the sieving process. Takes a lot of time. We thought we'd mix it with water in this, and it'll speed the process up.
Hold on a minute. If we're going to chuck all that stuff into here, it's going to smash up the finds.
Well, I've done some experiments, and there is some damage. There's no question there's some damage to some materials, but you can put in little mollusks, tiny shells, and they survive perfectly well, because what happens is most of the fragile things get thrown up into suspension in the cement mixer and don't get pulverised. It's only heavy things like mortar and plaster that
Which
get
we're
damaged.
not likely to get.
And this is good archaeology.
He assures me that it will not affect anything except the speed with which we can do it.
Although it's only the spoil that'll receive the cement mixer treatment and not the unexcavated blocks, it still seems rather extreme to me. But it would be fantastic if we could speed up the sieving process, because it's providing vital diagnostic information for the archaeologists.
Now we seem to be coming up with seeds, charred bits of hazelnuts from a variety of, blocks, only 4 of them, about 2 in each. Could that be indicative of some sort of hearth area that people are sitting there eating, throwing away shells, or is, this is too little evidence yet to say something like that?
Well, it's a small amount of evidence, but to me it's jolly exciting actually, because previously we found just one single hazelnut for a start. Most of the evidence on balance suggests autumn and winter occupation,
Okay.
but what we're building up here is a great jigsaw really, bits of evidence pointing to different seasons, and we hope that ultimately, we'll have a really coherent story.
And we still haven't finished with the few millimetres of sharpened flint I was so underwhelmed by yesterday.
Very often in making these things, you have a little byproduct, a little notched end that snaps off.
Okay.
Now, at this particular site, or these sites, we very rarely find those snapped ends. So it seems to me likely, at least on present evidence, that this microlith wasn't actually made on site. And the significance of that means that it was brought in ready-made, possibly in some sort of haft or shaft, and it's may have been broken and therefore pulled out and thrown away. This tiny, tiny piece of rock in itself is telling a little bit of a story about this particular part of the site.
With the end of day fast approaching, there's just enough time for Stuart and Robin to lift some plaster casts from our footprints experiment. And they do seem remarkably similar to the footprints at Rachel's site, particularly the children's.
Can you get the bag?
But the appallingly muddy conditions Robin and Stuart are working in also tell us that we've witnessed a unique moment in time. One of the things that we've begun to realise from our experiments on the mud this afternoon is that those Stone Age footprints can't have taken much longer than about 15 seconds to produce, because any longer and you start churning up your footsteps. So we've got a window in time of about 15 seconds, which we're trying to illuminate with lots of other finds. And these finds are increasing all the time. Another flint has come up, and for the first time, small bones, probably from fish or birds. By tomorrow night, we should have a very vivid picture of what was going on our mudflats that day 7,500 years ago when those little children were playing in the mud. Join us after the break. It's the start of day 3 at our South Wales Stone Age dig, and despite the early bad weather, everything seems hunky-dory.
Yeah, you've got frog's leg. Well, then hop over the bar and get me a sandwich.
But overnight, we've had to face up to a harsh reality. We're going to need all our diggers up in the trench tent all day, because processing Trench B's contents is taking much longer than we expected. In fact, we haven't even processed half of what we've dug already. So, with one day left, if we really want to find out the story of this site, we're going to have to apply forensic excavation. And that means all of us scraping away at these great big blocks of mud. And we're going to have to get cracking. So we're not going to have enough time to go back onto the foreshore to salvage any more of Trench B. I can't pretend this isn't disappointing. We'd hoped to save 15 square metres of at-risk archaeology, but now we have to accept it's going to be more like 5.
Did you hear that Pammy got a microlith out of one of these yesterday? Yeah, the second one.
Oh, that's
She
good.
just showed me this morning.
Yeah.
But on the plus side, we are salvaging evidence that would have otherwise been lost to the waters of the Severn Estuary.
I think that's absolute priority for sieving, that one.
Right, I'll take that one away right now.
Evidence that will add to Martin Bell's 13-year investigation of this rare Stone Age site.
Give it some.
Over in the fields behind the foreshore, Henry's taking core samples to find out how big the Mesolithic island was.
That's not going anywhere, is it? Suck fast.
Easier said than done. Back on site, Bone Jones and his cement mixer are working flat out to process the spoil from the trench tent. And in the incident room, Robin and Rachel are busy analysing the data from yesterday's footprints experiment to see what it can tell us about the trails discovered on the foreshore.
In the adult Brigid, the two stride lengths are very similar. However, in the child, it's either increasing the frequency of his walking or increasing the stride length.
Every bit of evidence that we accumulate will add to the picture we're drawing of what life was like here 7,500 years ago.
I've been systematically working through the material that's come out. Under the microscope, we've got this hazelnut, and you can see it's got this lovely ridged surface on it. And that's evidence that people were here and they were eating them because it's been broken. We've got evidence of raspberry seeds and we've got evidence of elderberry seeds.
Have you got raspberries?
We do. We've got a lovely little raspberry one here. You see it's got a black pitted surface.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's rather nice.
You can see that really clearly.
You can, can't you? But the really lovely ones, these elderberry seeds, I mean, look at that, you know, the ridges on it, ripples, very nice evidence.
So is this fruit and veg that appears all around the year?
The elderberries and the raspberry seeds would have only sort of blossomed sometime between August to October, so it's sort of autumnal food. The good thing about the raspberry seed as well is that it's actually charred. That may be a good indicator that it was people eating these raspberry seeds, and as you know, seeds get stuck in your mouth and there might have been someone eating it and just maybe spit it into the fire.
So are we saying that people only inhabited this area on a seasonal basis?
From the evidence that we've got, we can only say that they were in the area in the autumn time.
Intriguing to know where they were the rest of the year, isn't it?
It is intriguing, yeah.
As well as underlining the seasonal nature of this Stone Age settlement, these seeds also give a fascinating insight into the Mesolithic diet. A diet that would have been much more varied than you might expect.
Jackie, you've assembled a terrific range of ingredients here, but how do we know this was available to Mesolithic people?
Well, Mesolithic people tend to live on the edge of the marshes, the wetlands, the estuaries, and these are sort of things that you actually have quite freely available in those areas. We've got the crab apples, which are the wild herbs, goose, venison, duck, of course, lots of ducks on the edge of the marsh, and of course fish.
The vegetarians would have had a thin time, wouldn't they? It would have been hazelnuts and hazelnut pate and hazelnut muesli.
Yeah,
I suspect there weren't any, actually.
That's right.
We're going to cook our own version of a Mesolithic feast, using the foods and methods available to the hunter-gatherers that once lived here. But this was an era before plates, pans, or even clay pots were in use.
So what's the first job, then?
Well, the first thing we're going to do is actually clay bake this salmon.
Yeah.
Now,
have you stuffed that with?
I've stuffed that with some samphire, which is actually a delicacy today, but would have been everywhere in the Mesolithic.
Oh, right, so it'll be baked in a clay shield, in fact.
That's right, that's going to protect it from the fire and keep all the juices in of the fish as well.
Right. So they would have got this clay from the estuary or somewhere, wouldn't
That's
they?
right, it's basically rubbish clay for making pots with, but perfect for cooking.
Right.
I've got a little surprise for you here. I'm going to clay bake some duck eggs for you.
Oh, right, that's the vegetarian option, is it? Jolly good.
This is an experiment. We haven't tried this before, so we'll
Right.
see what happens when we do it.
That sounds good. I look forward to that.
Okay.
All very tasty, but nothing in comparison to the beast that Phil's now helping to dig down in the Reading University trench. This is part of an aurochs, a now extinct species of wild cow that featured heavily in the Mesolithic diet. And it's a pity we can't have it for our Stone Age feast, because judging by the size of the aurochs tooth they're now excavating, it would have been one heck of a hunk of beef.
If you compare these with the size of modern cattle teeth, twice the size plus.
If you stick 1 or 2 arrows in him and you don't kill him downright, he's going to be pretty narked.
Yes. I wouldn't want to be here when that
run like hell, yeah.
These fearsome creatures measured 6 feet in height, weighed almost a ton, and had horns the size of elephant tusks. and hunting them required all the sophistication Mesolithic man had at his disposal.
It's a fairly awesome weapon, actually. I mean, this is the equivalent of a series of barbs.
Yeah.
And the idea is that once you fire this into the flank of an animal, it does stay in and it wiggles about and it creates a massive wound. I mean, it's a pretty horrible thing, really.
So it wouldn't matter if that actually just damaged a big animal rather than kill it.
No.
Because with bigger animals, it would be difficult to kill it outright.
Yes, yes, something as large as an aurochs. I mean, you can imagine it, you know, something the size of a large minibus kind of coming at you.
Yes.
And you're armed with this, and it may well get away, but the chances are that it's pretty badly wounded and it's bleeding heavily, and you know, you and the dogs can follow through and do the rest.
Yeah.
It's in remarkably good condition, considering it's been in sort of pretty much waterlogged conditions. It really is quite incredible, isn't it? I mean, the bite on those are really well preserved.
Yeah.
Still, you better put that back in the bag. I'll get on with this bit of bone. I want you to carry on digging. There might be more of that beast down there.
We're fast approaching the end of day 3, and there's a great sense of relief among all the archaeologists that we've almost completed processing our 5 square metres of rescued foreshore. How you getting on, Bone?
Pretty good, yeah, we're going all right.
How much have you processed?
Well, we've done, I think, getting on for a couple of hundreds of litres of soil so far.
That's pretty impressive.
Well, it's pretty good, yeah.
What have the finds been like?
Well, we found lots of gravel, and we found some bits of peat, and we got nice bits of orange paint from the cement mixer.
So basically, you found nothing. You must be pretty frustrated. You've come all the way down from York to look at this fantastic site, but no finds.
But archaeology isn't always about finding what you expect, and some of it's just hard grind and persistence.
Is there anything here that you've seen which helps illuminate the prehistoric?
Oh, absolutely. I think the footprints on the mud are fantastic. It really brings us much closer to a very remote and distant past.
You're not sorry you spent the last 36 hours in mud and cold water?
No, I think it's been brilliant. I've enjoyed it very much.
But for some of our diggers, the end couldn't come soon enough.
It's very painful. It's a very painful way of digging.
How many of these little boxes have been done altogether?
Oh, we've done 5 metres worth, so that's 16 times 5. I can't. I'm too exhausted to work that out for you, I'm afraid.
How much have you found?
We've not done bad. We have found, you know, bones, bird bones and hazelnut shells and tiny little microliths, but this is the star find, and it's a nice, almost complete stone tool.
Good.
So that's a big one. Yeah. It's the first big one we've got, and it's got a brilliant edge on it. It's still keen, and you'd still cut yourself with it, I reckon.
But you'll be pleased now it's over.
Can't wait to get back to normal archaeology, Tony.
In spite of the frustrations of our diggers, this laborious process has provided us with some great finds. But the trench tent isn't the only source of good results. The experimental archaeology is also coming up trumps. We now have a rather tasty Stone Age supper cooking away, and the results from yesterday's trek across the mud have produced valuable evidence for Rachel's research.
It's been really, really worthwhile. I'm really pleased with the experimental results. Watching Brigid and Jake, you know, we've been watching how they've moved in the mud and how Jake had to alter his stride patterns to catch up with Brigid. We've also learnt to look at, from these plaster casts and recognise the differences between an adult footprint and a children's footprint, and I can now go away and apply these things that I've learnt from the experiments straight to my Mesolithic area.
What do you reckon those kids were doing?
Looking at the footprints, the way they're running backwards and forwards all over that area, I think they were just out really enjoying themselves.
We're now really getting a feel for the people who walked, ate and hunted on this Stone Age island during the autumn and winter months. But we also know that they would leave here to follow the herds inland during the spring and summer. And having looked at how Goldcliff fitted into the Mesolithic landscape, Stuart and Henry believed this island was the perfect starting point for these seasonal treks.
I mean, this is the whole of Wales we're looking at here, so you see Wales, Cornwall coming across here. Our site's right down just about there. And you can see it's between the two valleys, between the Usk and the Wye, as we know. And you can sort of immediately see where those go. If you're following the rivers, you're being taken straight up to the highland. Totally different set of resources. Yeah, so you start thinking about this sort of seasonal shift between here and then going up to the uplands at a different time of year.
We know there are footprints along the shoreline here, and there are other footprints that are being found up here towards the mouth of the Usk, so it could easily move up to this river up here.
Yeah. Absolutely, and I mean, in fact, there is confirmation in the sense that there are a number of sites up in this upland area which we've never really been able to understand in seasonal terms, and yet when you look at it this way, it would make very good sense if they were at Goldcliff at a particular time of year, maybe from here on in through the winter, then one could well imagine perhaps in the early summer moving up, perhaps following game like red deer into the uplands. And the best way, I think, would probably be up the major river valleys. And of course they could have done this quite easily, I think, with canoes and so on.
Over the past 3 days, Victor has been quietly beavering away, absorbing all the evidence that we've come up with and combining it into a picture that gives us a day in the life of Stone Age Goldcliff.
In a way, this is very artificially condensed because everything is happening that we know about, which would probably spread out, you know.
Yes, they're not even paying any attention to the fact that there's an aurochs being butchered about 10 yards away.
It's raging away and everything.
It's a beautiful picture, but it's sheer speculation, isn't it?
No, I don't think it is. We know quite a lot about this period, and of course we know a lot about this site from Martin's work. And so we've got the children's footprints, of course. We've got evidence of the aurochs, we've got evidence of butchery, the flint work, and so on. So, you know, there's a lot there that we know about already.
Are you happy with this rather revealing, skimpy dress? It looks a bit contemporary to me.
Well, we don't have any clothes from this period, of course, because they would rot away. We do have a little bit of evidence of even of textiles, but not from this site. And I think the general assumption is because we find bone needles, they must have been sewing skins together. Because exactly what style they were in is anybody's guess, and Victor's rather let his imagination run away with him here.
I mean, I'd happily take some off, actually.
I'm sure you would. But the picture doesn't just reflect what we've found. It's a reflection of what Martin and his archaeologists have done over the past 13 years, and will continue to do after we've left.
Gosh, that really is lovely, Victor.
Everything we've discovered at Goldcliff shows that Stone Age life wasn't a cliché of savages living on the verge of starvation. They were in fact sophisticated hunter-gatherers in tune with their surrounding environment. The tide may have reclaimed the site, but even though Trench B is underwater, it's still providing us with information, courtesy of the 80 blocks of foreshore we've managed to salvage. In the very last one, we've had what I think's our best find. That is an aurochs footprint. Not that anyone cares, they're too busy stuffing their faces with the Mesolithic feast.
If I'm not getting along, you're going to be sitting. That's it.
Try some of this, Joe. This is duck egg.
I've never had duck egg.
No, well, it's been clay baked. They put clay around.
It's goose.
It's gorgeous. Good,
isn't it?
Yeah. And when you've had some of that, you can have some berry-free pudding.
Thank you very much.
The people who lived here 7,000 years ago were the last of the hunter-gatherers. But gradually, their way of life died out, and a new style of living evolved, based on farming and settlement. But quite frankly, from my point of view, I quite like the Mesolithic way of doing things. Can I have a bit more of that duck?